Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, April the 30th, 2021. It is currently 9:44 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the middle of nowhere, Texas, also known as Ovalo, Texas. I'm here in the sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, and laying right here next to me on this table, right here, is a copy of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Yes, today we finally get back to that book. I know we've covered so many things. The last time we were able to open a copy of this book and talk about it was, I believe, April the 14th, and today is April the 30th. Yes, way too long of a delay. I apologize for that. I really do. Look, when I start these series, whether it's The Imitation of Christ, whether it's The Christian in Complete Armor, no matter what the series is, I have every intention of trying to do that every day. But then you know what happens. So many different other things come in, and people are emailing me, people this, and then this is happening in the world, and this is going on within Christianity, and we've got this to talk about, and this to talk about. Literally, this could be, and I know when I say things like this, the Theology Central podcast could be a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week podcast, and we would never run out of things to talk about and to cover. We literally could go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only problem, my voice would give out. And of course, at some point, I would probably need sleep. You know, I could probably make it maybe a week without sleep, maybe. But food, I would have to eat at some point. So I'd have to take some breaks. But like, you know, I guess if I was in a monastery, I mean, we're reading Thomas à Kempis, The Imitation of Christ, right? I mean, he was in a monastery. If I was in a monastery, I would go to my fellow monks in the monastery, and I'd say, hey, guys, here's what we're going to do. I need in this monastery, you build me a podcast studio. All right. Build me a podcast studio, and then y'all go about doing whatever you do. And I'm just going to stay in this room 24 hours a day, and then just podcast, take a break, eat, podcast. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking there's no way you would run out of things to talk about. How could I? Just think of this from a Christian perspective. We've got 2,000 years of church history. We've got 2,000 years of church history. There's no way I could talk about 2,000 years of church history in my lifetime. That's number one. Number two, look at all of the things that have been written in church history. How many classic books that we could talk about. Think about all of the theological issues, philosophical issues that we could talk about. Just think about, then that doesn't even deal with all the things that are happening around us right now to talk about. If you take the past, the present, then looking to the future and trying to make predictions, and then you just take the Bible, and then you just working through the scriptures. I mean, there's not an end to what we can discuss and talk about here on the Theology Central podcast. So I feel bad when I start a series and then there's a long delay. I feel bad, but hopefully when you realize, sometimes I think you realize if you listen to everything, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. Or I see a theme emerging. He's getting ready to chase that rabbit for a while. And like, for example, we started focusing a lot on biblical hermeneutics, right? For the VBC Bible Institute, we're studying typology. For the Niagara Creed that we're studying, we're talking about the Niagara Creed and its view of biblical hermeneutics. We're talking about the Bible having more than one layer of meaning, one level of meaning. We've been talking about that. So that's been dominating a lot of our time. So there's always something to talk about. I just want you to know that when I end up on all of those other things, it's not because I'm trying to ignore what I've already started. It's just there is so much to do, so much to talk about. I really wish I was better at finding a way to manage it. I know, I think you understand this. So many times I wake up with a plan, right? I've got, in our I have my study, and then I come down the hallway, and then I turn into the living room, and right there next to the living room, I guess it's kind of like a dining room, I guess is what we call it. There's a big table right there. And on that table, I always put all of my stack of all of my stuff, right? My wife hates it. Get it off the dining room table because it's all, I just leave stuff everywhere. Yes. When I was in the military, they would always talk about how can one desk be that messy? They would always gripe at me. And then I would always pull out studies from Harvard and Yale and other very, very well-respected universities that have done studies demonstrating that the messier the desk, the higher the IQ of the person who sits behind it. The cleaner the desk, the more organized the desk, lower the IQ. Now, I don't know how accurate that study was, or even if it was ultimately true. I didn't care to search out the truth because it met my purpose, right? It met my purpose. So, hey, messy desk, smart person. So yes, I have a tendency, like if you just look at if you could see the table that I'm currently sitting at, yes, it's a mess. So, but I always have a stack of stuff. And then when I wake up and I get ready to come to the church, I pick up that stack of stuff and I'm like, okay, that's what we're going to talk about today. And sometimes just from the drive from my house to the front door of Victory Baptist Church here in the middle of nowhere, Texas, everything changes. I hear something on Christian radio, I hear something on the news, or I'm walking through the front door and I start getting all of these notifications on my iPad. And I'm like, I look down, I'm like, wait a minute, I got someone asking me about this. I got this going on. I got this. Oh boy. Okay. So forget everything I was going to do. And sometimes, guess what's always in my stack? The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. It's always right there on the top of the stack. It just sometimes get pushed to the side. So I apologize for that. But let's not waste any more time. We are in chapter 2. Yeah, we're going backwards. We're in chapter 22 of the classic book, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. We're in the chapter titled, at least in my version of the book, my edition, Human Misery. Human misery. All right? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to back up, and I'm just going to read to get us to where we stopped, and then we're going to start from there. Now, I would highly recommend, since this is about human misery, about human suffering, I would highly recommend that you go to the VBC podcast and listen to our sermon, to the sermon I preached on Sunday on Romans chapter 8, where we talked about human suffering. All right, because I think it offers a very biblical perspective that may challenge you a little bit, and I think it'll be very beneficial and will be very much connected to this. I know that's kind of self-serving. Hey, go listen to something else I did, but okay, maybe it's self-serving, but I do think it would be beneficial. But are you ready? Here we go. Thomas à Kempis of The Imitation of Christ, chapter 22, book 1. Remember, it's broken down into different sections. Human misery. I'm holding the edition of the book that I have had since the 1990s, and let me tell you, it's not going to make it through this study. It is starting to literally fall apart. Yes, I mean it's going to fall apart, but I'm going to use if the pages fall out, I'm going to use these pages because I want to make it through this book one more time using this copy because I've been through this book so many times that I just feel like that it's fitting that if I bring this series to a conclusion, that this book will then ultimately be retired and have to be thrown away, and it'll be sad because I've spent a lot of time with this book. All right, so are you ready? Imitation of Christ, Thomas à Kempis. Here we go. Page 47 in my copy. Miserable you are wherever you be, or whether you turn, unless you turn to God. All right, simply put, he's claiming you're going to be miserable no matter you're going to be miserable. Number one, that's stated as a fact. Wherever you are or whether you turn, no matter where you are, no matter where you turn, you're going to be miserable unless you turn to God. Now, that's a big claim. We're not going to go back and review everything. We've already talked about it in the previous episode. Why are you troubled when the things succeed not as you desire? For is he who has all things according to his mind. Who is he who has all things according to his mind? So let's stop right here. So why are you troubled when things succeed not as you desire? Why do you get upset when things don't go your way? Why do you get upset when things don't go according to your plan and don't go according to your desires? Why do you get so upset about that? Who is the man? Who is the person who has all things according to his mind? Who is the person who everything goes his way? If for every person who's ever lived, no one can say everything went my way. If no one can say that, then why do we get so upset when it doesn't go our way? Do we believe we deserve everything to go our way, even though it doesn't go the way everyone else wants? Well, is it something? Does that say something about our arrogance and our ego? All right, we could talk a lot about that. Neither I nor you, nor any man upon the earth. So neither you nor me, nor any person on the earth can say that everything went according to their desire and their plan, because that's just not the way it works. There is none in this world, even though he be king or pope, without some tribulation or perplexity. Perplexity, I should say. Who is he who has the better lot? Assuredly, he who is able to suffer something for God. So now the issue here is who has the better situation? Everyone's going to suffer. Everyone's going to experience human misery. Who's better off? And he says the person who's better off is the person who's suffering something for God. That is better off. All right. Now let's continue. Many weak and unstable persons say, behold, what a happy life that man leads. How wealthy, how great he is, how powerful and exalted. But look to the riches of heaven, and you shall see that these temporal things are nothing, but are very uncertain and rather burdensome than otherwise, because they are never possessed without anxiety and fear. Man's happiness consists not in having abundance of temporal goods, but a moderate portion is sufficient for him. All right. Now, we spent all of the last time we were together, I think on April the 14th, that's what we talked about. Now we're going to advance this discussion. We're going to advance this conversation. And if you were trying, like, what just happened to your voice? I got ready to lift up my leg to put it up on a chair that I thought was next to me, and I lifted up my leg and I was like, oh wait, the chair had been pushed away. So I almost literally fell out of the chair. So that would have been embarrassing. Okay, so are you ready? Here we go. Trying to just joke around a little bit because the next line is about to get really, really, really heavy and really, really serious. All right, so I want to get us prepared. So you're ready? Thinking cap sign. Here's the words of Thomas à Kempis. Truly, it is misery to live upon the earth. Wow. Truly, it is misery to live upon the earth. What a very dark perspective on life. Truly, it is misery to live on this earth. Truly, it is absolute misery. Now, is that a biblical perspective? Now, a lot of times Christians will try to act like, no, see, being a Christian, everything's wonderful, everything's great, it's amazing. Is that more the biblical approach, or the more biblical approach is to acknowledge that it is misery to live on this earth? Now, he offers, in my edition here, he offers two scriptures. Now, sometimes when Thomas à Kempis offers a scripture, you go look at it and you're like, I don't know if that helps. Let's see if this helps. Now, again, he wants us to understand that it is misery to live upon this earth. It is misery. And he gives us two scriptures. The first one is from Job. Now, I always get nervous when someone references Job because sometimes they'll just pull a verse out of one of those speeches that are happening in Job, whether it's one of Job's friends or whether it's Job. And you've got to just realize that sometimes some of those speeches, not everything they're saying there it's obviously God's word, but it's God's word just giving us the account of someone giving a speech doesn't mean that everything they say there is accurate or we should build a doctrine upon it. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, let's go to Job 19:1 just to see what scripture he offers here. All right, Let's go to Job chapter 19. Job chapter 19. Here we go. Job chapter 19. All right, here we go. Job 19:1. Job is speaking here. And he says, how long will you vex my soul and break me in pieces with words? Now, he's responding to I think Bildad. I think Bildad speaks in chapter 18, and Job is responding in chapter 19. So it seems that what Thomas à Kempis is doing here is that he's quoting Job 19:1 to simply say that living in this life is misery, because even when things go bad, you got so-called friends who show up, and even their words, all their words do for you is they vex you and break you into pieces. That's all they do. So it's truly misery in this life, because even the people who're supposed to bring you comfort, they really just vex you and break you with their words. So it's truly miserable to live in this world. Now, that sounds such a defeated. That's just, look, on one hand, I love this. I love this because it's so brutal and honest, which you don't usually get within many Christian publications. I think you always get kind of a Disney version of life. You know, if you watch a Disney show and they show high school, it's the most fraudulent, fake thing that you've ever seen. That's not the way it works in high school. That's Disney high school. That's not real high school. I think many Christian books and many Christian songs give you a Disney version of life and not a real view of life. Thomas à Kempis is just coming right out and telling you it is misery to live upon this earth. Now, he offers a second passage of Scripture. He offers Ecclesiastes. So there's Job 19, and then he offers Ecclesiastes, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Verse 17. All right, Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 17. Therefore, I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Now, please remember that Ecclesiastes is basically a journal of Solomon trying to find out the meaning of life, the purpose of life. And he has discovered that under the sun, this is so important, such a key phrase in interpreting the book, that under the sun, everything is grievous, vexation, and vanity. Everything under the sun, it's meaningless, 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 empty, empty, empty. Now, some people understand that. Some people do not. Some people live their life and they want to they assign so much meaning to their job, their career, high school, a diploma, accomplishing this goal, and they try to find some sense of meaning and identity in those things. But ultimately, it is empty, it is vain, it is meaningless. So this starts with very strong words. It is misery to live upon the earth. Now, again, I want you to write down that phrase. It is misery to live upon the earth. And I want you to just really meditate on that. Is that a Christian perspective or not? And remember, Thomas à Kempis, we don't have to agree with him. We're just reading this book because it's very influential throughout church history among people who are Protestant and Catholic. So we're just looking at it. Doesn't mean we have to agree with everything in it, but we're looking at it for its historical influence. That's why we're looking at it. So that's a very important phrase. Now, but he's going to continue. Listen to what he says here. This is very interesting. The more spiritual a man desires to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him. Wow. I told you it was going to get heavy. I told you it was going to get dark. All right. So, number one, it is misery to live upon this earth. And you're like, okay, so does he think, is that just a fact for all men? Well, how does this apply to someone who's trying to live for God? Now, look what he says. The more spiritual you desire to be, the more spiritual you desire to be, the more you're trying to grow spiritually, you're trying to be spiritually, the more you're trying to be spiritual, the more spiritual you're trying to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him. So the more spiritual you desire to be, the more bitter this life is going to become to you. Now that seems so contrary to the way modern Christianity sells it. Modern Christianity seems to sell it, the more spiritual you become, the better this life is going to be. The happier you're going to be, the better your marriage is going to be, the better your family is going to be. It's like, hey, Christianity, spirituality is the key to happiness. The spirituality is the key to, your best life now. That's almost how Christianity, I know I'm borrowing the phrase from Joel Osteen's book there, but even if people don't use that phrase, that mentality comes through over and over and over. Thomas à Kempis is just threw a grenade into the midst of Christianity, and he's like, no, the more spiritual you become, the more bitter this present life is going to become to you. So this is Thomas à Kempis's formula. An increase in spirituality is going to increase the bitterness of this life. Wow, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around that. I don't know if anybody's listening live. If you can wrap your mind around that, then please let me know. This is like, whoa, this is some heavy stuff here. Okay, let's continue. I know I'm breaking it down to such little minute sections that I'm not probably doing justice to everything. So I'm going to step back, and what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to go back to the beginning of this paragraph and read further down, then back up and break it down, right? So that we can kind of get a greater sense of what he's trying to say here. Because he's saying something that to me is so startling and so contrary to the way most Christians think, that we have to try to process this. All right, so here we go. Truly it is misery to live upon the earth. The more spiritual a man desires to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him, because he perceives better and sees more clearly the defects of human corruption. For to eat and to drink, to sleep and to wake, to labor and to rest, and to be subject to the other necessities of nature is truly a great misery and affliction to a devout man who would gladly be set loose and free from all sin. Oh, man. Wow. Okay. I almost... Whenever I read this part, I almost get chills. I really do. Now, you may not have the same impact, but it really just sends, wow, because this perspective of life is just so radical. And it's just, okay, let's take this part again. Oh, wow, this is just so much here. Okay, I've got to try to pull myself together, right? Because right there, I just wanted to stand up and start walking around. I wanted to just stand up and go, whoa, 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 whoa. Like if we were in the middle of a book club together, I would be standing up, walking around the room, right? Because I know I'm very animated. I would be having a very animated fit right here because this is so deep right here. Okay, let's take this apart. So let's take it apart. Number one, according to Thomas à Kempis, it is misery to live upon this earth. Number two, the more spiritual you desire to be, the more bitter does the present life become to him. It is miserable to live on this earth. And the more spiritual you seek to be, the more bitter this life is going to become. Those are two dogmatic statements. Now, the explanation. Those are the dogmatic claims. Now the explanation, the proof of that. Why is this the case? Why is it the case that if you seek to be more spiritual, life is going to become more bitter? Why is that? Here's the reason why. Because you perceive better. You perceive something better. The more spiritual you become, you perceive better. So you're going to look at this life and it's going to appear to be more and more bitter because you perceive something better. Right? If all you've ever known in your entire life for food is some polluted water and some expired bread that is 4 or 5 days past its date that you should be eating it. And that's all you've known. Some dirty water and some really bread that's past its date that you should be consuming it. And that's all you know. Well, then your perception of life is going to be one way. But if all of a sudden you look over and here's absolute crystal clean fresh water and an entire meal, and you go over there and you eat that, you're never going to be satisfied again with polluted water and bread that's past its fresh date, right? You're never going to be satisfied with it because you now have seen better. What Thomas à Kempis is saying, the more spiritual you seek to be, you're going to be exposed to the better, the spiritual. And therefore, the more you pursue the spiritual, then the more that everything in life is going to appear to be more and more bitter because you've seen better. You've experienced better. That's a very important thought. So let's read this again. Truly it is misery to live upon the earth. That's number one. That's the first dogmatic claim. The second dogmatic claim, the more spiritual a man desires to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him. There's the second dogmatic claim. And then the first reason, because he perceives better and sees more clearly the defects of human corruption. You see the better and you become more. So there's two reasons this works. You perceive the better and you become more aware of human corruption. You see the corruption in you, you see the corruption all around you, and you're like, woe is me, I'm undone, everyone around me is undone, I'm unclean, they're unclean, we're all unclean. Please, who's going to deliver me from all of this? Lord Jesus, come quickly, take me away from all of this. You perceive better, and you're made more aware of the defects of human corruption. Now listen to this. This is very important. So here's what happens. You become more spiritual and you perceive better and you see more clearly the defects of human corruption. Once that occurs, now listen what happens. To eat, to drink, to sleep, to wake, to work, to rest, and to be subject to the other necessities of nature is truly a great misery and affliction to a devout man. The more spiritual you become, you're going to see that eating, drinking, sleeping, waking, working, and resting, that you're subject to the necessities of nature. In other words, now you realize, man, okay, you start realizing I'm subjected to these things. I have to have food. I have to have drink. I have to sleep. I have to wake up. I may have to work. I may have to rest. You realize that you're subjected to these things because of your nature. And this will become a great misery and affliction for the devout man, because you would gladly be set loose and free from all of that. You don't want to be subjected to your nature. You don't want to be subjected that my nature requires, I've got to sleep. I got to sleep. I don't want to sleep. I want to pursue something better. I got to eat. You want to pursue the spiritual, not constantly feed the flesh and appease the flesh and serve the flesh. You realize you become subjected to a nature that demands, your fleshly nature demands, I got to sleep. You can't pursue the things of God. You can't pursue it. No. You got to sleep. You got to sleep because your body requires sleep. Why? Because I got a frail, weak, corrupt body. I got to eat. Why do I have to eat? Why do I have to eat? My body demands it. And even if I try to starve it through fasting, I can only do it for so long because that nature will rise up. And you realize that you are subjected to all of these things. Thomas à Kempis's claim is the more spiritual you become, the more miserable you will be, realizing how much you are into subjection to these base natures, to your base nature, I should say. That's a radical, radical, radical thought. And so what are you going to, you're going to want to be set loose and free from all sin. For the inner man is much weighed down with bodily necessities in this world. See, that's the thing. The spiritual man, you're spiritual, you want to pursue the things of God, but you're weighed down by the bodily necessities. All right? In fact, he says, you're weighed down, with bodily necessities in this world. You realize that you're weighed down. I mean, I experienced that. You'll hear me complain about it. I would want to sit here and do one, Bible study exercise, devotional message, work on things for the VBC Bible Institute. I want to really pursue that. And then the next thing you know, I'm sitting here and maybe you'll hear it on the microphone. Sometimes you will not. My stomach starts growling and rumbling, right? And my stomach is telling me you've got to eat. And I'm like, man, I didn't eat breakfast because I just wanted to get here. And now I'm starving, or I ate breakfast, but I've been here so long that now my body is like, you got to eat. And I don't want to eat. 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 I don't want to waste that time. And look, in some ways, I guess why I get chills reading this is because some of what Thomas à Kempis is explaining here, I've experienced. Look, I've stated it there's two things I despise. And I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but now I've got someone in church history that will back me up here. Okay, here we go. I loathe. I despise. I hate. There is an actual hatred in my body for sleep. I don't understand sleep. Sleep is the most ignorant, dumb, foolish concept in the history of all of humanity. It makes no sense to me because here's the way I perceive it. Maybe you don't perceive it this way. This is the way I perceive it. There is an hourglass somewhere, right? And the grains of sand are slipping through. And I don't know how much sand I have left in the hourglass. You never know. You have no clue because you go walk through any cemetery. Just stop at a cemetery today and walk through. Look at the ages. You're going to see people who died when they were 7, people who died when they were 23, people who died when they were 34, people who died when they're 40. There are people who die at all ages. So that means literally you don't know how much sand is left in that hourglass. You don't know. You have no clue. You may have just 4 or 5 grains of sand left. You may not be around come tomorrow. So here I am today. Right? Here it is today, April the 30th. I don't know if I'm going to see tomorrow. So why in the world would I want to go lay down and sleep for 8 hours? That's 8 hours of what? Nothing. That's useless. Why? I got other things I would prefer to do, other things that I want to pursue, other things that I want to do. I don't want to waste 1 second of this life sleeping. Sleeping is literally like, okay, this is what it's like. Someone hands you $100, right? And then you take part of that money and just give it right back. I'm given 24 hours in a day. That's all I'm given, 24 hours in a day. There's no way to get it back. There's no way to save it. There's no way to preserve it. That's all I have. And I'm going to take 8 hours of that 24 and just throw it away, just burn it, just give it to nothing? That makes no sense to me. What? No, I refuse. I want an injection that will keep me from ever having to sleep ever again. You don't even understand how angry I get when I have to go to sleep. And when I hear people like, oh, what did you do today? I took a nap. And they almost brag about it. I'm like, you're bragging about throwing away hours of your life. You don't know how many hours you have left. And I've stated it before. I can guarantee you, my mother, but she wasn't even 40. When she died, if she would have had a second to speak, I doubt she would have said, I wish I would have slept a few more hours. I wish I would have taken more naps. No, she would have wished that in the 39 years of life, she would have used time to do more things because she didn't even get to see 40. She didn't get to see any of her kids fully grown. She had a daughter who was, how old was my sister when my mother died? 8 years old? I don't even know. She was very young. Okay. I wasn't even, was I 17? I don't even know if I was 17 yet. My brother was 15? I don't remember all of our ages. I have to try to put it all back together in chronological order and try to all get together. It's numbers. I'm horrible with remembering numbers. I could sit here and figure out the math, but no, actually I couldn't because I'm horrible at math. But that's a whole different story. But the point is it's gone. Nobody gets to the end of their life and wish they would have slept more. No. And then, so that's one thing I hate. I hate sleeping. Second thing I loathe is eating. What a waste of stupid time. What is that nonsense? What is that all about? Got to stop and eat. Got to stop and eat. Got to stop and eat. I got to eat in the morning. Got to eat in the afternoon. Got to eat in the evening. I got to eat. Got to eat. Got to eat. That's my body control. I don't want my body to control me. I want to tell my body, no, you don't tell me what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. Okay. I get angry, but it reminds me of the weakness and frailty of my own body. I cannot stand those things. It's such a waste of time. It's a waste of time. He said, and so Thomas à Kempis comes along, and I'm not saying that he would see it exactly like I would. I'm not make it very clear. We would probably perceive it a little different, and he would probably condemn me. Now remember, he's a monk in a monastery. I'm not. So I hate the loss of time. Not just because I want to pursue spiritual things, because there's just so many other things I want to pursue. So he would view me probably being very worldly because he's in a monastery. But I don't want to sleep because there's music I want to listen to. There's maybe a book I want to read. There's a movie I want to watch. There's so many things I want to do, right? Yes, there's Bible study I want to have. Yes, there's church history books I want to read. There's philosophy books I want to read. I want to listen to crazy radio programs at 2 a.m, like Coast to Coast AM. I want to do so many different things. There's not enough time in a day to do what I want to do. There's never 24 hours in a day. I need 72 hours in a day, and I still would not have enough time. Because there's so much I want to do. Every day, I realize that I did not do all the things I wanted to do in that day. And guess what? I can't catch up the next day doing the things I want to do on that day, plus the things I didn't do the day before. Every day, I end my day frustrated and miserable because I didn't do half the things I wanted to do. Every day is a constant day of misery for me. Every time I have to stop and eat, that's miserable. That's a waste of time. Every time I have to sleep, that's miserable. That's a waste of time. So I can relate to this. Slightly different, but he's arguing that's the way we should view it if we are spiritual. Let me read this all again. This is one of the most amazing paragraphs ever. This may be the most amazing paragraph in the whole book. I know I say that probably every time we read a paragraph, but this thing is fascinating. So read this again. Truly it is misery to live upon the earth. The more spiritual a man desires to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him, because he perceives better, sees more clearly the defects of human corruption. In fact, I'm going to stop and read it one more time because my mind is already racing so far in front of me. I don't know if I'm reading that very well. So I'm going to read it again. I would challenge you to find a copy of this paragraph and print it out and just spend some time talking about it. And please let me know your thoughts. You may think Thomas à Kempis is completely wrong. And you know what? You may have a very good argument. I'm thinking of some scriptures that may try to counter some of this, but I really would like to hear your perspective. But let's read this again. Truly, it is misery to live upon the earth. The more spiritual a man desires to be, the more bitter does this present life become to him, because he perceives better and sees more clearly the defects of human corruption. For to eat and to drink, to sleep and to wake, to labor and to rest, and to be subject to the other necessities of nature is truly a great misery and affliction to a devout man, who would gladly be set loose and free from all sin. For the inner man is much weighed down with bodily necessities in this world. Therefore, the psalmist prays with great devotion to be able to be free from them, saying, "O bring thou me out of my distresses." Psalm 25:17. Now, I don't know if that's an accurate interpretation of Psalm 25:17, because he's saying that when he's saying, bring me out of my distresses, that the psalmist is praying, bring me out of my distresses from all of the necessities of life. They distress me. They bother me. Now, you can go look up Psalm 25:17 and see if that's an accurate application. The early church was very weak sometimes in correctly applying Scripture, but that's a whole different discussion on hermeneutics. All right. I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to stop right there because that's such an amazing paragraph. That's such an amazing paragraph. So let me ask you this question. All right, let's try to summarize this. Wow, this is some good stuff. All right. I know. I guess that's self-serving. When I say, "Wow, this is good stuff," am I bragging about me? I don't think I'm bragging. I hope that comes across that I'm bragging about me. This is good stuff because the book is just so good. I'm probably not helping. Probably if I would just shut up, the book would do its job. But obviously, then I would just be reading it to you, and that would not really be what this is designed to be. It's about us discussing the book. So hopefully I'm helping. All right, here we go. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it is a biblical consistent worldview to claim that it is misery to live on this earth? That's question number one. Do you think it's a biblically consistent worldview, if I could speak correctly? It's a biblically consistent worldview to say it is misery to live on this earth. That's number one. Number two, do you think it's a biblically consistent worldview to say, or not even a biblical consistent worldview, do you think it's biblical to say the more spiritual you desire to be, the more bitter this life will become? Do you think it's a biblical worldview? It's a biblically consistent worldview to say it is miserable to live on this earth. And number two, do you think it's a biblical way of thinking to say that the more spiritual someone desires to be, the more bitter this life is going to become? And number three, from a biblical perspective, how should you view the necessities of your nature? In other words, how should you view sleep, food? How should you view all of those things that your body demands of you, your nature demands of you? How should you view them? He views them, Thomas à Kempis views all of them, that we are weighed down by bodily necessities. And that to do all of this stuff is great misery and affliction. He says that we should view these necessities as great misery and affliction, and we should, and that they weigh us down. They weigh us down. They're a weight, they're misery, and they are affliction. How should you view the very necessities of your nature? So number one, is it a biblically consistent worldview to say it is miserable to live on this earth? And why do you think that doesn't come across in most Christian preaching? And number two, is it biblical to understand that the more spiritual you are going to become and desire to be, the more bitter this life is going to become to you? Is that biblical? And number three, what is the biblical way of viewing those necessities of nature, like rest, sleep, food, and how should you view them? Should you view them as misery, affliction, and a weight? I'm going to leave that right there because that is good stuff. All right? I can't wait to hear. I cannot wait to hear. If this is what's going to happen. It's going to be my misery and my affliction, because this, I have a feeling, like if I turn on the microphone right now and talk about something controversial in the news, I could get like 1,000 responses. But something like this, I'm not going to get any responses. And that's going to be miserable and affliction to me, because I want people to, this is the kind of stuff that to me is far more important than what's going on in the news and your political view. This is more important than your political philosophy. This is a spiritual philosophy about life. All right. I'm going to stop right there. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for listening to that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this, because every time I open this book and read and talk about it, the more I am so grateful that I get to do this. Because I don't care if anyone else is listening. I don't care if anybody else benefits from it. Man, this book has always challenged me, and it always will challenge me. And now I get to challenge you, and hopefully someone out there benefits from it. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.